If the Iranian people want to get rid of Khamenei, it was up to the Iranian people, not up to Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump. And by the way, what a great regime change war this is. They replaced Ayatollah Khamenei with Ayatollah Khamenei. That's real high-level success in your regime change war. His son, apparently, is more hardline, we're told, than his father. And why wouldn't he be? They just killed his mum, his dad, I think his wife as well, his sister. It's not a guy who's going to do a deal anytime soon or roll over for Donald Trump. So strategically, it's a disaster. And legally and morally, no, you can't just kill people you don't like.
In today's video, Mehdi Hasan absolutely destroys Piers Morgan on Piers Morgan Uncensored. The real argument here isn't just about Iran or the Middle East, it's about whether foreign policy decisions are actually making the world safer. What Mehdi pushes back on is the idea that killing foreign leaders or launching military strikes automatically solves the problem. History suggests the opposite. Experts have repeatedly warned that assassinating major political or religious leaders can trigger serious regional instability and retaliation, sometimes empowering even harder line successors instead of moderating the situation. But before we dive into today's video, make sure to hit that subscribe button and enjoy the video.
In other words, arguing there's a much bigger geopolitical battle here at stake. And it may explain Trump's interest in Greenland, his interest in controlling the leadership in Venezuela, his apparent plan to maybe go into Cuba. Is that if you take energy as the overarching motivation for all this, and the AI war, which will use up vast amounts of energy, and the belief that if America is to prevail in that, it's going to have to win the energy war, it does make strategic overall sense. What do you think of that argument?
Well, look, US foreign policy in the Middle East has always been driven partly by energy and oil. When you and I were opposing the Iraq war 23 years ago and mentioning the oil factor, people called us conspiracy theorists. That was obviously not the case. This time round, of course, they keep saying the quiet part out loud. Lindsey Graham went on Fox over the weekend, or one of the Sunday shows, and he said, if we control Venezuela and Iran, we control 30% of the world's oil reserves. So we'll make tons of money, he said. So, you know, quiet part out loud from the Republican war hawks. Look, I'm sure China's a factor, but let's not overstate this. Again, Donald Trump is not Rasputin. He is not Bismarck. He's not a big geopolitical strategist. A lot of this is old-fashioned imperialism. He likes the idea of telling countries what to do. He wants to pick Iran's next leader. He wants to pick Venezuela's next leader, etc. And look, let's not hide the fact here. The Israeli angle is the Israeli angle. I get why people don't want to talk about it. You get attacked, I see all the time nowadays, as anti-Semitic when you dare criticize Israel. It's insane. Marco Rubio came out and said it out loud. Again, quiet part out loud. He said last Monday, he said, we went to war because the Israelis were going to attack. And we knew that once the Israeli attacked, they would attack us, so we attacked first, which is a bizarre thing to say, because why not just get Israel to stop from attacking Iran if you're really worried about blowback? But the idea that this wasn't a war for Israel, when the Israelis are bragging it's their war, when Lindsey Graham is bragging it's their war, when Marco Rubio is conceding it's their war. I mean, this is a war they've dreamt about for years. They don't care about the future of Iran or the Iranian people. They want a neighborhood of failed states so that they can have a greater Israel. We know that. And I think, look, the Chinese factor is interesting because, Piers, that assumes that you win this war. Because right now, you could argue China and Russia are winning. Piers, you've been a great critic of Russia. Russia right now is getting oil revenue to fund its war in Ukraine, thanks to Trump's decision to attack Iran. India is being told by the US, buy oil from Russia. So Russia's now getting funding for its war effort in Ukraine, thanks to Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. And of course, the Chinese love it when America burns through its oil reserves and its soldiers and its cash, spending $1 billion a day. The Chinese love our military overextensions.
For starters, the idea that energy plays a central role in global strategy isn't controversial anymore. About 20% of the world's oil supply moves through the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway right next to Iran. When conflict breaks out there, global markets react instantly because any disruption threatens the energy supply that fuels economies around the world. We're already seeing that effect. Oil prices have surged and shipping traffic has been disrupted as tensions escalate in the region, pushing energy costs higher and raising fears of inflation spreading through the global economy. And then there's the cost of the conflict itself. Early estimates show the US military operation is costing roughly $1 billion per day, with the first week alone running into the billions as expensive munitions and carrier operations pile up. That's not just a defense statistic, it's taxpayer money and long-term debt, especially if the conflict drags on. Mehdi's broader point also connects context to a pattern analysts have warned about for years. When the US becomes deeply involved in Middle Eastern conflicts, other global rivals often benefit strategically. Military overextension drains resources, distracts from other geopolitical priorities, and can shift leverage toward powers like China or Russia that aren't directly bearing those costs. And there's another historical lesson here. Removing leaders or escalating militarily doesn't always produce the intended political outcome. In several cases across the Middle East, removing top figures has led to power vacuums or even more hardline leadership emerging afterward, creating new instability rather than resolving it.
Just finally, are you pleased that the now dead Ayatollah Khomeini, the older Khomeini, is no longer ruling Iran?
It's a good question. I don't take pleasure in killing anyone. I don't think you should have illegally killed the foreign leader of a nation, who's also, by the way, a spiritual leader to millions of Shia Muslims around the world. He wasn't my spiritual leader, but he's a spiritual leader to many people I know. And that's a reality. I know people watching at home, non-Muslims, may kind of scratch their heads and say, but, he's a tyrant in a foreign country. But that is the reality. He wasn't just a political ruler. He was a spiritual ruler. And to kill him, to assassinate him on day one of the war, will have insane consequences, Piers. I hope I'm not back on this show in a year, 2 years, 3 years saying to you, Piers, do you remember when I told you that killing Khomeini will have a backlash? There will be terrorism, there will be revenge attacks. I hope that doesn't happen. But it could happen. It might likely happen. US intelligence is suggesting it might happen. The blowback from killing a foreign head of state, from killing an Ayatollah, a religious leader, in this way, in this blasé way. By the way, Piers, they also killed the people he wanted to succeed Khamenei. They're so incompetent. Trump now admits that in the next door building, they accidentally also killed the people they wanted to be there, Delcy Rodriguez in Iran. So no, I'm never going to support assassinating foreign leaders, killing foreign leaders. So, Colonel Gaddafi was raped and murdered on the side of a street in Libya. Is Libya better off without him? Well, A, not sure about that. B, obviously I don't shed any tears for Gaddafi, but that is not what you do. I'm never going to support the killing of anybody outside of a trial, outside of due process. It's for the Iranian people to decide their future. If the Iranian people want to get rid of Khamenei, it was up to the Iranian people, not up to Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump. And by the way, what a great regime change war this is. They replaced Ayatollah Khamenei with Ayatollah Khamenei. That's real high-level success in your regime change war. His son apparently is more hardline, we're told, than his father. And why wouldn't he be? They just killed his mum, his dad, I think his wife as well, his sister. It's not a guy who's going to do a deal anytime soon or roll over for Donald Trump. So strategically, it's a disaster. And legally and morally, no, you can't just kill people you don't like. Am I going to support, I don't like Benjamin Netanyahu, Piers. Maybe you've noticed so for the last 2 years. But I don't support anyone assassinating him.
My actual question, though, it was brilliantly deflected. My actual question was, are you pleased that he's no longer ruling Iran?
Well, I don't support the vilayat-e-faqih, what is called the Islamic system of rule in Iran. So I don't support any ayatollahs being in charge of Iran. In Iraq, for example, you have an ayatollah named Sistani, who the Americans have worked with for a long time. He's the spiritual leader of a lot of Iraq Shias and a lot of Shias around the world. He's never taken executive authority. He's never said, I'm going to be in charge of Iraq. He sits in his house and he gives his religious rulings. I prefer that system of government. So in a sense, are you asking me, do I hope that, do I want ayatollahs to rule Iran? No, I don't. I'm on the record supporting a democratic system, but I don't support killing people. No, I don't.
No, I know. I wasn't asking if you supported killing him. I just was asking if you're pleased he's no longer ruling the country.
It's a loaded question because his son is leading the country. So am I pleased with that? No, I'm not pleased with his son leading the country.
Now, history actually gives a lot of examples of this. Take Libya in 2011. When Muammar Gaddafi was overthrown and killed, many Western leaders celebrated it as a victory. But in the years that followed, Libya collapsed into political chaos, militia rule, and human trafficking networks. Even President Obama later described Libya as the worst mistake of his presidency because the country never stabilized after the regime change. The same pattern has shown up in other cases. When the US killed Iranian General Qasem Soleimani in 2020, many analysts warned about retaliation and escalation. Within days, Iran launched ballistic missile strikes at US bases in Iraq, and over 100 American troops suffered traumatic brain injuries from the attack. That incident showed how targeted killings can trigger immediate backlash rather than calm a conflict. there's also a legal issue here that international law experts frequently point out. Under the UN Charter, countries are generally prohibited from using force against the leadership of another sovereign state unless it's an act of self-defense against an imminent threat. That's why the UN Special Rapporteur on extrajudicial killings previously warned that targeted assassinations of state officials risk undermining the international rules that are supposed to prevent constant cycles of retaliation between nations. And strategically, leadership assassinations often strengthen hardliners rather than weaken them. Political scientists who study militant groups have found that when leaders are killed, organizations frequently become more radical and less willing to negotiate because successors rise through more militant factions. In other words, removing a leader can eliminate moderates and empower the most aggressive figures. So the bigger point behind Mehdi's argument isn't sympathy for authoritarian leaders. It's about recognizing that international politics isn't a movie where eliminating the villain ends the story.
It's not a question you can answer in a vacuum, can you, Piers?
Well, no. So if you're not pleased with the sun ruling the country,
are you pleased that Saddam Hussein? Are you pleased that Saddam Hussein is not ruling Iraq?
Yeah.
But you oppose that war like I did.
Yeah.
Okay.
The two things are
so you can hold multiple positions
compatible.
at one time. Agreed.
Absolutely.
Agreed.
There's no problem saying that you're...
I'm agreeing with you.
You could easily... So you've agreed... You've now said that you're pleased the son... You're not pleased the son is running the country. Is that what you said?
No. No, I'm not.
Ah.
Not at all. I've said that publicly.
But... So does it automatically follow you?
And he's only ruling the country. Hold on. He's only ruling the country because we killed the leader before him, his dad.
I understand that. But I'm just trying to work out by natural process of elimination, you must therefore de facto be pleased that the dead Ayatollah is no longer ruling the country.
Am I pleased he's not ruling the country? It's a question in vacuum. So does that mean I'm pleased with his son ruling the country? Because it's a weird gotcha question without
No, I'm not asking about his son.
I don't want to say yes to that because that implies that I'm okay with the fallout from it, which I'm not. But I have made my position clear. I don't think any Ayatollah should be running Iran. That's not my political or religious viewpoint.
So it sounds like a yes.
But I don't think you should kill them in order to get rid of them. But I don't think you should kill Ayatollahs in order to get rid of them.
I didn't ask you if you supported killing. I just said, are you pleased he's no longer ruling the country? Sounds like you are, but you're just very reluctant to use the word yes.
Yeah, because I have to think through the consequences of what I'm saying, Piers. It's good for you to ask a great question in a vacuum, but if I say yes to that question, does that mean I'm supporting what Trump and Netanyahu did? No.
I don't think any of that follows. You could just say yes or no.
And I don't take pleasure in killing people without trials. If Ayatollah Khamenei did something wrong, the Iranians should have tried him. The Iranians should have tried him.
Wasn't the question. Mehdi, that wasn't my question. I didn't ask if you were pleased he got killed.
It was just a question about my feelings.
I just asked, are you pleased he's no longer ruling the country? It's a yes or no. You either are or you're not.
No, because I can't. No, it's not. No, Piers, it's not as simple as that. I know you've now latched onto this, but I have to think this through. No, I don't think it's a matter about my feelings.
I've only latched onto it because you won't answer. I think it's an easy thing to answer. I think.
I didn't know it was a therapy session to ask me about how I'm feeling. I thought it's about my political viewpoints. My political viewpoint is it was wrong to kill him. It was illegal to kill him. It will have disastrous effects for the region. It's mad to take out a head of state and a spiritual leader, and it's even madder when you replace him with his son, who apparently is quote unquote worse than him, both for Iran and for US and Israeli interests.
I'll just try one more time.
I'm not pleased at the situation we're in.
I'm not asking you about the situation. Simply asking, are you pleased that he's no longer ruling the country?
No, I'm not pleased about what's going on right now in Iran, which involves killing Khamenei. So I'm not going to answer your question out of any context for you to clip this out of context. No.
One of the biggest historical lessons is that removing leaders through force often creates consequences that are far worse than people expect in the moment. The 2003 Iraq War is a classic example. Saddam Hussein was unquestionably a brutal dictator, but the power vacuum after his removal triggered years of sectarian violence, the rise of extremist groups like ISIS, and a conflict that ultimately killed hundreds of thousands of people and cost the United States trillions of dollars. Even many of the officials who supported that invasion later admitted they underestimated what would happen once the regime collapsed. You see similar patterns elsewhere. In Libya, the overthrow and death of Muammar Gaddafi in 2011 initially looked like a decisive victory. But without a stable political transition, the country fell into civil war, competing militias, and a fractured government that still struggles for control today. Former US officials and European leaders have openly said that the lack of a post-regime plan turned that intervention into a long-term disaster. There's also a broader strategic issue here that Mehdi's perspective touches on. Targeted assassinations and regime change can strengthen hardliners instead of weakening them. Political scientists who study militant and authoritarian movements have found that when leadership is removed violently, the next generation of leaders often becomes more radical and less willing to negotiate because they rise to power during conflict rather than diplomacy. Then there's the legal and diplomatic angle. International law generally discourages assassinating foreign heads of state because it creates a dangerous precedent. If powerful countries start openly killing rival leaders, it essentially normalizes that behavior globally. That's why many legal scholars and diplomats warn that once those norms break down, retaliation and escalation become much more likely.